Hello internet! Honkai sure has a lot of characters and I'm sure we all know that. With the announcement of a couple of new characters being buffed, I do think there are a lot more buffs that they could do, which is why I decided to make this video. Let this video also be a discussion for everyone else as well in the comment section down below of who you think should get a buff too. It is in my opinion that they should have a lot more buffs rather than just buffing a couple of characters every time and not that often at that too. So let's just dive into it, and do remember, this is just an opinion. Feel free to discuss in the comment section down below. Before we start though, just a real quick word from today's sponsor. It'll just take a bit. With the all-new version 4.0 finally approaching, maybe you're out of resources or you're panicking about pulling new characters though, here's where I'd like to introduce to you a website that I use for top-ups, which is Aniba. Aniba offers the best top-up services and it's worth every bang for your buck. The best part is Aniba complies with all of Hoyoverse's guidelines with top-up services, so it's certainly trustworthy, and as usual, I myself has used it, had zero issues with it. You can top up for yourself or for your friends because all you need to do is click the first link in the description, choose the item that you would like to top up, enter your server and then your UID, complete the payment, and voila, you see your resources in a designated account. No login needed. What's interesting is that there's a 10% cashback on what you're purchasing, or you can claim by going into your orders after purchasing, click on claim, and you'll see the cashback in your Aniba wallet. This cashback can be used for any other purchases in the Aniba website and can top up for Spiral even more. Or heck, pick up a gift or two. It's simple, it's a good deal, and most importantly, it's trustworthy. Check Aniba out and you'll support me as a creator too if you do give it a go. As usual though, no pressure at all. And with that said, let's get back into the video. And with that said, we can start with the Forgotten Ones. I'll straight up say it, man, these characters are all really much outdated, even from before the recent version, honestly. A lot of these characters in the Forgotten One ranks are either 4 stars or maybe characters that are from the standard banner that have already lost their effectiveness for a while now. To start with the 4 stars, there are a lot of issues with them, honestly. First of all, starting with lower base stat does not help at all. And second of all, a lot of these 4 star have some glaring issues, especially with the HP inflation going on with endgame bosses. If we were to point out a couple of the issues, we do see someone like Yukong having a very distinct way to keep her buff up. You have to make sure her roaring bowstring is always on her in order to obtain the buff, and she simply loses her buff unless she keeps her bowstring up and ults with it as well. It's a big hassle compared to other characters that simply has to kill like one skill move and then they'll have a 3-turn buff. So doing a 4-star like her needs a buff of some sort. Either remove the fact that it's a hassle to get her buff, or increase the value of her buff, or in fact just do both but don't make it so broken that you have no reason to pick any other 5 stars, right? This is only one of the examples. There are also other examples like Arlen. I don't really even gotta talk about Arlen because he has been a problem from the start of the game. Although he's basically the Jesus of HP change teams though. He kind of needs to like reduce his HP, but the value it brings even with him draining his own HP does not even come close to even his peers, even his 4-star peers. There are a lot of other 4 stars as well that has their own little bit of issues, especially in the Forgotten Ones tier. I think they all deserve a bit of a buff or a rework to at least, under good circumstances, to work in some level of endgame, right? Otherwise, we just never see 4 stars being used. While I'm okay with some 4 stars not being that useful, but this is a lot of 4 stars, man. And to talk about the 5 stars, we do see Welt, we do see Yancheng, we also do see the Fire MC, and the Physical MC. Now, this one's a tough one because, first of all, to talk about the MC, we all know with MCs, they get new paths and they get new elements, so the older ones inevitably fall behind. This is a pretty tough one because with how Honkai Star has made it so, you really want to use the new path and the new element of the new MC, right? There's no reason for you to swap to like the old one. Now, maybe you could, and maybe some people still use the Harmony MC even right now. The Remembrance Path MC is really strong, but there are really very minimal need for Physical or Fire MC these days. To start Fire MC, his or her ability to support your team in terms of survivability isn't even that great anymore. The healing is minute and the mitigation is minute as well, which is why he is never going to be used as just a sustain and more as a break character or debuffer. In terms of debuff, they have a lot of taunting, but right now most bosses are immune to taunting, which makes it very tough. And yeah, Physical MC, I'm sure it's designed to just be a beginner character, honestly, but it'd be interesting to see a rework of it though. And yeah, I mean, it's the MC. Buffing them to a certain extent just to keep up with the game is certainly better than just having them stay as what they are now. And while Yancheng, we already know for a long time now what his problems are. I'm not going to explain too much about it, but he's basically a lot of RNG anyway. I'm sure there are people who can still force him to somewhat work, but it will probably take a lot of E6 supports at his side, and he might still not do that well. In terms of what sort of buffs he could get though, first of all, I definitely do think there needs to be a removal of all his RNG procs after he does his basic. It's like his percent chance you can proc like a follow-up attack. The strongest characters right now don't really have that much RNG to them. It's always if you use a skill point, you know exactly what you're gonna get back. And Yanqing does have this struggle where, oh, you could trigger a follow-up attack and freeze the enemy, but you also can't sometimes. It's really inconsistent. You don't know what you're getting. And not to mention, his numbers are really just not that high anyway. I do think it's time to get a buff, really. So we got a first group of people. Honestly, it's not even one person. I do think all of the forgotten characters should just get a buff. Otherwise, with version 4 in the horizon, if the HP of the enemies get higher and they get even tougher, we will actually never ever get a chance to use these older characters anymore. And it's a shame because they have really good designs. One thing that you gotta give credit for is just the quality of each animation and skill. I would really love to use these cool skills, animation, and effects as well of the older characters that we've not seen for a while. And moving up next, let's just talk about more specific stuff rather than the whole tier. We do see some off-meta characters. For the off-meta tier characters, I do think one character stands out as must be buffed eventually, right? And that character would be the first limited banner ever in Seele. There's no way Seele has not gotten like somewhat of a buff yet. I do think they might make it more often to buff characters, and I do think Seele is probably up there in the list. But yeah, Seele has been struggling for a while now after the end of version 2 especially. For one of the first reasons is that a lot of end games now do require you to have a lot of AoE capability, and Seele's AoE capability is certainly not as good. Now her entire gimmick is just simple. You gotta kill mobs in order to get another turn to kill another mob, or maybe just go nuke the boss instead. That's how you get the most damage out of Seele, and it's that exact criteria that is pretty tough for her, really. If you have to kill someone first in order to get a massive boost in damage for you to ult right after, or use a skill right after with really good buffs, that means you have to kill someone first with a weak skill, or with a skill that hasn't been buffed by her own kit. And in some stages, the bosses might just be a singular Sam that you cannot really kill a lot of mobs with, or the mobs might just be really bulky like the new Dark Sam. All the mobs are really bulky, and not to mention, even when she does, she needs to spend skill point for each and every single skill usage, and that is a big wastage of skill points, right? That is just a lot of skill points needed, and that'll leave you with an issue of you don't have enough skill point for your supports to help Seele, you don't have enough skill point for your sustain to help your entire team, and sometimes you might have to hold back with Seele just to save up skill points. And these sort of problems will almost never happen with newer characters. They're designed to perfectly use very low skill points these days. If anything, some team like Agleo and Sunday just generate skill points so quickly that you don't even see yourself spend too many skill points at all. So with Seele being at the other end of the spectrum, I think she's definitely due for a buff. While I'm not sure what buff could make her balance in a way where you would use her, but you also would replace the most meta characters with Seele. I think to start though, we definitely need to tweak her numbers higher considering HP inflation. And secondly, we definitely need to remove the part where she needs skill points even after killing an enemy. I think once you kill an enemy, you're awarded with an extra turn. You're probably okay with like her not needing skill points, right? Make it so every extra turn she has doesn't need her to spend skill point. And even then, there's still the issue of what if she just straight up doesn't kill enemies, right? There are a lot of enemies that has so much HP that you can't really just one shot. And when Seele doesn't kill an enemy with her skill or ult, it's hard for her to get extra turn and get going. And that's why I think she's definitely due for a buff. Do let me know though. This one's interesting. I'm not sure what you would give Seele a buff for, right? Do remember you also don't want her to be too strong, because otherwise, well, you don't want her to just replace like version 4 characters for sure, or version 3 in fact. And that is, in my opinion, one of the characters that needs to buff the most. And moving up next though, we do want to take a look at IL Danheng as well. IL Danheng with Eidolons can probably still work right now, but without Eidolons, he's certainly held back a lot, especially by the amount of skill points he needs, while the value of the skill points spent isn't really following up with the HP inflation, right? Now, if you have his E2, he can generate skill point for himself with the ultimate. He can get extra turns with his ultimate as well. Those make him a lot more threatening for sure. I do think he's also due for a slight buff, nothing too insane, because he's one of the characters where if you over buff him, he might actually just be like, say, better than Mighty, right? He is also an imaginary character that hits 3 enemies. I do think a simple tweaking of making him do slightly more damage would make him shine enough. That would make it so like some days, some weeks, I would use IL Danheng with like a special team that generates good skill point, but otherwise I might stick to the stronger characters, and that wouldn't make him just overbearingly good because of one buff, yeah? And moving on next, we do have some of the older standard characters. I do think the one that needs a rework or buff, honestly, most standard characters do need them, and I would like to point out Japard and Bailu for sure. These two are really direct. They are sustains, and sustains that are good in this game currently can always make sure they heal, they can cleanse, and they can keep your entire team alive. Well, Bailu and Japard can probably do only one of the things that I just mentioned, but not the other. Both of them can keep the team alive okayly, but what they definitely lack is just the cleansing effect. There are a lot of boss with CCs now. you simply have to have cleansing effects. I think a very simple addition of cleansing effects would make these two characters very much more solid, and you might actually get people who use them. Imagine if a Bailu kit that could just cleanse. She could have the same kit, she could just work the same at all, and she doesn't really heal that much more when you compare it to the meta healers, but she can finally cleanse your team now and actually keep yourself alive. You might actually see more people use her. Same case with Japart, right? Well, I will say with the free Danheng PT, I don't foresee Japart being used that much, even with a rework. It will have to be a really interesting rework, not just make him shield like Danheng, but perhaps he could have a skill that targets an AoE scenario and freezes a lot of them. That would be an interesting addition to make him sort of like a control sustain. But of course, you do still need the debuff cleansing. Otherwise, it's just hard to use him or have a reason to use him as a sustain at all. But imagine a rework like that, something so unique that makes Japart suddenly like a potential CC character. That would actually make it so much interesting for older players to just try them out, right? They won't replace the meta insane characters that you would convince yourself to not pull anyone, but they're also interesting enough that you would bring them off of like the stash of characters that you don't use and try them out. I think it's very interesting. And the other static characters, I do think while they do deserve some sort of buff because they're not that strong, but I at least still see them around. With Clara, sometimes I see her, it's really rare, but with Himiko, definitely I do see her in specifically Pure Fiction. So I do think they can take a buff. I don't actually think they need a buff as much as like the previous characters I mentioned. So Dr. Ratio, while I do think he deserves a buff as well, but well, he is a free character, so I'm not exactly sure what people would think about that. If you would buff a free character before buffing a lot of other needed characters that would much prefer to buff that are limited, I think that might not be as nice. But hey, feel free to recommend any buff ideas you may have though. Yep, those are more of the important ones because they are low tier, obviously. To move up a tier though, we do see some of the characters that you actually see a bunch of now. To start from the lower tiers, we do see Jing Yuan. Now, honestly, I don't think he needs a buff because you can technically still use him. Like, it can still be used, especially with, say, Sunday that pushes not only Jing Yuan but also Lightning Lord together. It could work, it's just not that well considering the HP inflation going on. But I won't say he needs the buff, right? And for the rest of them though, these 4-star actually does not need a buff, and I think they're actually placed very fine. In my opinion, 4-star should work exactly like this. Like, you don't use them every time, every team, but when you want to use them, it works. If you say I want to use a Pella, even in current meta teams, some teams can tolerate a Pella for sure. Say put a Pella instead of a Tribi that you don't have to help out Castro with some damage output. It's not gonna work as well, but it's gonna work somehow, somewhat as well. So that makes a good 4-star, right? It's not like they're so strong you have to use them every time, but sometimes you could use them. And I think that should be what 4-stars aim to do. And for people that are really a big fan of such 4-stars, they could just pull them off anyway. And in some weeks, they actually work really well, which is why I think the 4-stars in this tier is perfectly fine, considering especially some of them being also good in Pure Fiction, like Ice Herda is still solid. So while I think they don't mind a buff, but they don't absolutely need the buff for them to work right now. And as for the rest of them though, I actually don't think none of them needs a buff because, well, for one, they already gotten the buff. We got Blade and Jinglu that already has the buff. They're also reworked to now being like a HP change type of characters. And I said Blade's about the same, but Jinglu specifically, they were really strong in a week, but after that though, I guess it's also because of like the lack of the correct element. We don't see them as often, but they're still sometimes around, I suppose. I don't think it's wise for them to just buff the same character twice before buffing a lot of the other characters that didn't get buffed. So, and as for Yun Li, I actually think she deserves a bit of a buff, I won't lie. Same thing though, at this tier, I think while they would love a buff, I don't think they absolutely need a buff to work for sure. But in the end, Yun Li is like a different type of Clara. It's an enhanced version of Clara. But as usual with HP inflation and everything like that, Yun Li's numbers may not be able to keep up for much longer. So maybe it's time for a bit of a buff. But I don't think she absolutely needs it yet for now. There are characters who deserve it a lot more in my opinion. As for the rest though, we do see Harmony MC and Fu Xuan. I think Harmony MC is okay. As for Fu Xuan, she actually still works as a sustain. Just a really, unique one, given she's the only one with the whole damage sharing mechanic. And instead of healing the team a lot, she heals herself a lot because she takes the most damage out of the team. It works, but it's just gimmicky, and it actually doesn't synergize that well with HP change teams because HP change teams would rather them take damage themselves, not just Fu Xuan. So I don't think she needs a buff, but she is actually kind of annoyed by the fact that HP change teams needs to like actually take HP off themselves and have the enemy hit them to really be valuable. She's kind of just not as synergistical with the current meta, but hey, in the future, she might actually be back depending on what DPS gets released. Because let's remember, Fuxuan also has really good buffs that also provides you with crit rate. So yeah, I don't actually think she needs a buff, but she may be, you know, deserving of a little bit if she's also gonna continue to be anti-synergistic over the next meta. But I don't think that'll be the case though. Just that right now, HP change, not exactly the best meta for Fuxuan. And moving upwards, we do see the really often characters now. And of course, these are the characters that definitely don't need a buff at all. I don't think anyone needs a nerf either. I think all of them are perfect, about the same like usability relative to their tiers. And these are the recent characters, and some really good ones like 4-star Gallagher still holding his own up there, or like a Bronya that's a standard banner character still holding his own up there. I think these are characters that are designed pretty well. So well, I think there are a lot of characters that needs above. I also do think they do a good job with some characters to keep them relevant. However, I definitely think there are more characters that should also be somewhat relevant sometimes, and I do think there are way too many characters down in like the forgotten ones list, which is why I made this video. All of them deserve some sort of gameplay, right? Surely. I'm sure there's a data as well that will show you how much they're used, and I'm sure you can probably find out that maybe less than 0.1% of people use, say, Luca. And Luca is actually a pretty cool design character, man. A slight rework or slight buff every version, honestly, I wouldn't complain about that at all. You don't have to do it every time, but you know, make it often, right? And that'll be all for my video. Do suggest what you think would be a really good buff in the comments down below. I did share a couple of mine, and do remember as well, it's just an opinion. I hope you keep it civil. And that'll be all. We're going to be covering a lot of version 4 stuff when it drops as well, so do follow the channel for that. And that is all. Take care.